Good afternoon, everyone. So I think we can start this session. So it is my great pleasure today to introduce Professor Donald Richards, who is the instructor of the scientific writing course, The Difficult Art of Writing Well. Professor Donald Richards is a distinguished Professor Emeritus of Statistics at Penn State University. Professor Richards obtained his PhD in 1978 at the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. His research interests include multivariate statistical analysis, reliability theory, combinatorics, probability inequalities, representation theory, and harmonic analysis, special functions of matrix argument, astronomy and astrophysics, value investing, financial derivatives, and applications. Professor Richards has served as co-editor of statistics surveys and associate editor of several journals, including the Journal of the American Statistical Association, the Journal of Statistical Planning and Inference, Stat and Probability Letters, Statistics Surveys, and the Annals of Statistics. He has also received several accolades in his illustrious career, including being a fellow of the American Mathematical Society and the Institute of Mathematical Statistics. So without further ado, I will let Professor Richards take over. Professor Richards, all yours.
Thank you very much, Sharmista. By the way, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Jim?
Yes, I can hear
good.
you, Don,
All right.
and I'm really happy to see you.
Yes, thank you for having me, Jim. Yes. So today I am to talk about scientific writing, the difficult art of writing well, and I will try to do my best to make it not only informative but entertaining. All right. So the first thing to do is to share my screen. And suddenly my Zoom window has, okay, here we go. So let me share my screen. And this is, here we are. And I think I want to go to, should I go to full screen view? Yes, I think I should, right? Enter full screen. All right. So
Very
are
good.
we, all right. So, way back in the old days, I think it was in 2006, I was spending time at the NIST building down at SAMC, and SAMC had a conference for graduate students, and I was asked to give a lecture, and I assume that this graduate student network conference is sort of a continuation of that series of conferences. Is that right, Jim?
I want to give credit to the graduate student network that works with NIST. So this is not just continuity. This is a fresh
oh, it's a separate step. Okay,
initiative.
all right,
And,
okay, all right, okay.
They have full control.
All right, good. So although the emphasis is supposed to be on scientific writing, I actually believe that there is not a whole, that when you get right down to the core of it, scientific writing or writing for the humanities have much in common, and we need to pay close attention to great writers, regardless of where they come from. So let's jump to it, right? So the abstract, in this course, I will discuss the difficult art of writing well. I will motivate the discussion using my experiences as a student, a teacher, a researcher, a colleague, and a parent. I have 2 daughters. I will argue that good writing will provide enormous benefits for your students, colleagues, your family, and you. I will offer from my own career several examples of good writing that were highly beneficial for me. I will also provide some practical advice together with some examples of superb writing from which we all can learn. Now, in fact, if you look at the abstract, which is posted on the, excuse me, the GSN conference website, you will see that it's not exactly the same as this abstract. And the reason why is because whenever I see a piece of writing, I simply cannot help but revise it. And so I started revising my own abstract. I spent about an hour today revising it until I got it to a point where I think it's much better. So this is part of being a good writer. Great writers never stop revising what they've written. And so I will always be trying to revise my own writing, and yours too, by the way. Right. So the key phrases from the abstract: my experiences as a student, a teacher, a researcher, a colleague, and a parent. As a student, I've had to write many papers for my professors. As a teacher, of course, I had to write articles for my students and comments for my fellow teachers. As a researcher, I've had to write papers and to review articles. As a colleague, I've reviewed many research proposals. In fact, there was a time when I was at the University of Virginia for something like 12 years. I had a perfect track record. Every single grant proposal that I was asked to revise before my colleagues sent it off was approved for funding. And as a parent, I've revised many documents that my daughters now know that if they give me anything to read, I immediately start revising it. And my daughter, I have my older daughter, who holds a PhD in chemistry from Berkeley, is now working with the University of California's agricultural research system. And she wrote an annual report and sent it to me and said, "Dad, I'm very proud of this report." And I immediately sent it back with about 20 comments in red all over it. She was not very happy, but it's not personal, right? It's just good writing, good business. Okay, good writing will provide enormous benefits for your students, your colleagues, family, and you. And I will describe some of the benefits that have come to me, not just research benefits, but personal benefits, financial benefits, and so on. And then I will offer some practical advice, and I will show you examples of superb writing from which we all can learn. I'm going to offer, in a couple of instances, cash prizes to people in the audience who are suitably or sufficiently attentive. So, and I won't tell you that I'm offering money, so you need to pay close attention, because suddenly I will spring this cash prize, and the first person to win the prize, well, I'll send them a check, or they can wait until we meet at a conference, and then I'll take them out to a very nice dinner. Any restaurant of your choice, no problem. Okay? So stay awake, stay close, right? So in attending any conference, my first thoughts about the speakers are, who are these people? What are their credentials? Now, did anybody look me up to find out if I had credentials to give this talk? If you did, just raise your hands or say, yes, I did look you up and I thought you might know what you were talking about. Nobody? Seriously? But how do you know that I'm not a con man? You don't even know if I'm Donald Richards, right? Well, Jim knows, but you don't know that, right?
We definitely looked you up. I don't know.
Who? You did?
We definitely.
Okay, right. Next, how do you know that I have the credentials to give this talk? How do you know that I really know what I'm talking about, right? How do you know, before you go to a talk, how do you really know for sure that the authors know what they're talking about? And
I actually don't know. Sorry, you actually gave a talk a couple of years ago in our department.
Where?
At Bentley University Department of Mathematics.
Okay, good. All right. So one person did, right? Okay, right. So, a few years ago, there was somebody who came to Penn State to give, it was quite a few years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I read the abstract 3 times and I couldn't understand it. And I said, I'm not going to this talk. I'm just not going. I'm busy, right? I have other things to do. So I didn't go to the talk. And the next day, my colleague, Steve Arnold, who was a very sharp guy, he passed away some years ago, but he was a very sharp guy. As I was getting to my office door the next morning, he said to me, "Did you go to the talk yesterday?" And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, I went and I didn't understand a thing about it." He said, "I don't think that guy knew what he was talking about." And I said to him, I read the abstract and decided that I couldn't understand it, and therefore I didn't think the guy knew what he was talking about. So, my advice to you is, before you go to a talk, do some legwork to make sure that you really, if you detect that they really don't know what they're talking about, then then why do you want to go? You want to, you may be wrong, but you should at least think about it, right? And again, past performance is not a perfect predictor of current success. And even if the person has been brilliant in the past, it doesn't mean that they're going to be right today. So, you're really taking a chance when you attend a talk, right? And, you only have one life to live, and you don't want to waste it going to talks given by people who have no clue what they're talking about. So think about it, okay? No, so let me try and justify my credentials, okay? So yes, I retired in 2021. I had spent 42 years as a faculty member at 4 different universities: the University of the West Indies, where I got my PhD, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of Virginia, and at Penn State. And, I'd visited many other places, went on sabbatical at the Institute for Advanced Study, and so on and so forth. Now, the key, though, is that English is my mother tongue. That's really the only language that I know. I know a little French, I know a little German, I can say hi and hello in various languages, but English is really all I know. And English is what I grew up with. My mother, who was a teacher, she also received her bachelor's degree in education. The very same year when I graduated with my PhD, she graduated with her bachelor's. She encouraged me to read widely, and I did. So I was very lucky to have had her for a mother. I was also very lucky that I had an aunt, one of my father's younger sisters, who was a teacher, and she graduated from the University of Toronto in English, and she taught me how to write essays. And writing an essay was really important at that particular stage in the schooling system. And so my English improved very much from writing an essay under her tutoring, and from reading, Shakespeare and so on and so forth. On the mathematics side, my father was very good at mental arithmetic. And because of him, he could just do math problems, arithmetic off the top of his head. And so I got into doing it too and trying to compete with him. And so, that's one reason why I like math. And then another reason is that my mother was also a whiz at algebra. In fact, she told me that when she was in teacher's college, she got 1 A in all 3 years that she was in teacher's college, and the only A she ever got was in mathematics. Yeah. And back in those days, by the way, less than 10% of students received an A in any course. Yeah. So that tells you what the standards were like. So here is your first homework assignment. Okay, let's go. I will pay any of you $50 minus $5T for the correct answers in T seconds to all 3 of the following problems. Go. I'm counting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. No answers yet. Come on. 5, 4, 3, 2. Jim. 1. Okay.
Don't embarrass me, Don.
Well, if I can't call on the director, then I can't call on the students, right? So I just want to point out something to you about squaring numbers that end in 5. Here is the trick to doing it. Suppose you want to square 95. So what by the way, that because 95 ends in 5, then the result is going to end in 25. So 25 is always going to be the last 2 digits. Now you take this 9, you add 1 to it, you get 10. You multiply 10 by 9 and you get 90. So the answer is 9025 or 9025. What about 995 times 995? Well, again, the answer is going to end in 25. Now you take 99, you add 1, you get 100, multiply it by 99. Well, 99 times 100 is 9900. So the answer is 990025. What about 1995 times 1995? Well, again, the answer ends in 25. You take 199, you add 1, you get 200. You multiply 200 by 199. And by the way, if you multiply 200 times 199, the answer is going to end in 2 zeros. And then 2 times 199, well, that's 398. So the answer is 3980025. Right. So this is a pretty good trick. It was one of the reasons why my my wife Mercedes started to pay attention to me. She said, "So you could do this forever?" I said, "Sure." And she sat up and looked at me and said, "This is interesting." And so, you never know, right? See the benefits of reading and writing well and thinking, right? Right? You end up with you end up with a great wife, right? So, or spouse, right? Okay, so, all right. Any questions so far? No? Do you want me to keep going with these examples? No, you could prove it, right? You can prove it. Okay. It's elementary algebra, right? So back to writing. So in 1981, I had an incredible stroke of luck. I interviewed for a job at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of North Carolina, and I crossed paths with a guy named Kenneth I. Gross. And at the time, I did not know this, but at the time I met him, but in 1978, he had written a paper on the evolution of non-commutative harmonic analysis. And later on, when I read the paper, it was the first time I ever came across the phrase diarthrodial ganglimus. Ever heard that phrase? Diarthrodial ganglimus. It is the property of the jaw that the jaw can be both rotated, right? You can open your jaw like this, but you can also slide your jaw. So your jaw can open like this, but you can also slide it along like this. It's the only joint in the body which can do that. And in that article, so it is the unique property of the jaw that it can be both rotated and translated. Translate, you move along. In 1979, the article was awarded the Lester R. Ford Award for Articles of Expository Excellence, published by the American Math Monthly. And in 1981, it won a second prize, the Chauvinet Prize, the highest award for mathematical expository writing, awarded by the Mathematical Association of America. So this guy, Ken Gross, knew how to write. He was incredible. I mean, I would go to him with a crazy idea, and he would question me. And before, after 2 days of working together, my crazy ideas were sorted out, and I would always kick myself, and I would say, how come I couldn't have said it so nicely, so smoothly, so succinctly? I couldn't understand it, but I kept paying attention. So here is how you're going to learn how to write well. First of all, find a great teacher. Find several great teachers, and even more, try to find a superb mentor. A good mentor can make a big difference, and luckily for me, I had a great mentor at writing mathematics, Ken Gross, and a great mentor will, I guarantee you, make a huge difference to your life. So you have to go looking for that mentor. Or if you're lucky, a mentor might come looking for you. Now, what happens if you can't find a great mentor or a great teacher? Then you need to read widely amongst authors who are known to write well. So you have to go look for people who have won writing awards. Look, for example, one thing you could do is go back to look and see all of the papers, all of the people who have won the Lester R. Ford Award or the Chauvinet Prize. These are prizes by the Mathematical Association of America. I don't know whether any of the statistics societies have awards for expository excellence, but I will mention some statistics authors in any case, right? So you have to read the classic papers, the famous books, the authors who are known to write well. That's how you start learning yourself how to write well. If you want to become a great chef, for example, there was a time when I wanted to become a great French chef of French and Italian cuisine. So the famous French chef is Marie-Antoine Carême, who was Charles Talleyrand's chef. There's another guy, he wrote the monumental treatise on French cuisine, and everybody else is just takeoff on Carême. Everybody takes some chapter of Carême and they try to simplify it, but it's all Carême. Right? There is Bartolomeo Scapi, who was an Italian chef, and he wrote the grand treatise on Italian cooking. There is Manuel Maria, he was a Spanish chef, Manuel Maria Puga y Parga. He was a very funny guy, and you should go to Wikipedia and look up Manuel Maria Puga Iparga, and you will start laughing when you read some of the things that he wrote. But the point is, he was very clear on what needed to be done. There was no, you never had to read a sentence more than once in order to follow what he was saying. Right? So that's where you start off writing well. You find a great teachers, you try to find a superb mentor, or if you're not inclined to look at mentors, then you need to read the authors who are known to write well. Okay? Example, David Friedman. David Friedman, who died some years ago, a professor of statistics at UC Berkeley. He wrote Statistical Models, Theory and Practice, which is a great book for people who are looking for research problems. Even today, 18 years later, that book, I bet if you go and search, you will find 500 papers that have started off with articles from that book. Research articles, that is, that have started off from this book. Yes, this book is worth buying and reading over and over. In particular, the article one, I think it's chapter 3 in the book, is Snow on Cholera. You remember the famous story of how cholera was identified in London, right? The famous physician who tracked down what was the source of the cholera? Snow. And Friedman's article, Snow on Cholera, is a classic in good writing. And then there is Friedman Pisani Purvis, which is the best undergraduate statistics book that has ever been written and will ever be written. There is no book that can ever be written better than Friedman Pisani Purvis. And sadly, by the way, it is my impression that the statistics community doesn't use Friedman Pisani Purvis anywhere near as widely as we should or we used to. And I think one of the problems is that in order to teach from Friedman Pisani Purvis, you really have to know statistics like the back of your hand. You see, that's the problem with using a great textbook. To use a great textbook, you have to know the material superbly. If you don't know the material superbly, then you cannot understand the book, and then you go use a different book, a weaker book, and so, well, you see my point, right? So no, aim to use the best books ever, because it will not only lift up your command of the field, but lift your writing ability. And I noticed, by the way, that Friedman Pisani Purvis has been translated into Spanish, Chinese, and Hungarian. And not many undergraduate books that have been translated into multiple languages. Oh no. And by the way, behind me is my background. I am quite close to Cape Cod these days, and the sunsets on Cape Cod are simply fabulous. So maybe we could hold the next graduate student conference on Cape Cod, and I'd be happy to come out and give the talk out there. Right, Jim? Okay. So now here are some, now I want to talk about some famous writers, superb writers. Maybe they're not famous, but certainly superb. Salomon Botner. So Salomon Botner, virtually every paper or book that Botner wrote is now regarded as a classic. Yes. There is the famous story of Harold Bohr, who was the brother of Niels Bohr, the physicist. Harold Bohr was a very good mathematician, and he wrote a paper that was something like 100 pages long on the subject of what are called almost periodic functions. And Botner read this 100-page paper, and then he reduced it to an argument that is so short that it can be described in a conversation. Botner reduced a 100-page paper to 4 pages. So what that means is you could get in the elevator with Botner, and by the time you got off on the 6th floor, he had told you the argument. The entire contents of this 100-page paper had been reduced to a brief elevator conversation. That requires thinking and writing, which is at the highest order. And so if you are a student on the probability side, if you're planning to go into probability, my advice is go and read as much as you can of Botner's work. And even Bohr himself. Bohr later on wrote a book on almost periodic functions, and he paid tribute to Botner. you know, I can imagine if somebody had reduced a 100-page paper of mine to 4 pages, I would feel, I don't know, embarrassed. But Bohr was quite generous. He said, I have followed Bottner's proof, which is outstanding as a beautiful and a natural generalization of the fire summability method. And so today, the whole approach is based on Bottner's 4-page paper. So Solomon Bottner. Okay. Another person, Robert Strickhartz. Robert Strickhartz died actually a year ago, maybe a year, 2 years ago. He was a professor of mathematics at Cornell University. And he wrote a book, The Way of Analysis, which is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read on mathematical analysis. In preparing my talk, I discovered that back in 1983, Strickhartz was awarded the Lester R. Ford Award, which is the same award that Ken Gross was received for his paper on diarthrodial ganglimus. So Strickhartz, yes. Strickhartz wrote a long series of papers, very long, beautifully written papers. But that book is really it's just, you wonder why didn't I think of that? Right, okay. Richard Feynman, anybody heard of or not heard of Feynman? Okay, so Richard Feynman, as you know, was a Nobel laureate in physics, brilliant guy, a very interesting person. He wrote the Feynman Lectures on Physics. So he actually, someone actually took the notes and put them together, and then they revised them and published them in 2005. Perhaps the most popular physics book ever written. More than 1.5 million English language copies sold, and probably even more than 1.5 million copies in more than a dozen foreign languages. So we're talking what, over 3 million copies in various languages. And Feynman's principle was very simple. He said, if we can't explain it to an undergraduate, then we don't understand it fully. Which reminded me of Albert Einstein's principle, was that you don't know something well if you can't explain it to a child. Now, how many of us would like to explain to a child chapter 1 of our dissertations? That's pretty tough. Yeah, so these are the people to read. You know, as I said, Bottner, I mentioned Ken Gross, I mentioned Bottner, I mentioned Strickhartz, I mentioned Feynman, and also Einstein. Okay. So my principle is that if we can't explain it to our parents, then we don't understand it fully. And especially your dissertation. If you can't explain the concept of maximum likelihood estimation to a poet, then do we really understand it? For example, how did I explain maximum likelihood estimation to my kids? Well, I didn't use the phrase maximum likelihood estimation. I started off by saying, well, it's likely that such and such, for example, we were looking for a key that was lost, and we looked all over the place and we couldn't find the key. So I said, well, given that we have looked all over this room, it's likely that the key is in some other room. And we went from room to room, and as we went through the various rooms, finally we came to the last room, and I said, no, it's most likely that the key is in this room. By the way, it turned out the key wasn't in that room. It was in one of the rooms we had missed. But the kids could see this concept of likely, more likely, most likely. And ever since, the concept of maximum likelihood estimation is well known around my house. So if you can explain it to an undergraduate student and your parents, and even to a poet, then you might understand it. And let's remember, if we don't really understand what you're talking about, what we're talking about, then we cannot write clearly. As an example, I've been an associate editor for Statistics and Probability Letters now since 2007. So that's 16 years now. In the 16 years as an associate editor, I have handled close to 150 papers. And my acceptance rate is something like 20%. So 150, 1/5 of that 30 of the, about 30 of the 150 papers have been accepted, 120 have been rejected. So why does this happen? Well, the bulk of the papers that were rejected because it's not clear that the person really knew what they were talking about, and so they made mistakes in the mathematical calculations. Then they couldn't write properly to explain what they were talking about, and it's depressing actually that some papers are rejected within 15 minutes. I can write, it takes me longer actually to write the explanation, because when I reject a paper, I try to be kind. I try to explain in great detail why the paper is rejected, and I try to provide advice on how to revise the paper if they decide to revise it and resubmit it to the same journal or to another journal. But if they had understood clearly what they were talking about, they wouldn't have ended up in that situation. Yeah. So here is a piece of advice for you. I call it the warning, but it's more advice. If your parents cannot understand the first paragraph in chapter 1 of your dissertation, then do you understand your dissertation? How many people would say, yes, I still understand it, even though my parents can't understand the first paragraph? Come on, don't be shy. Anybody raising their hands? No? I'm looking for hands raised, but I don't see. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. You might, but so let me tell you what happened to me then. So back to my friend Ken Gross. He died some years ago, a few years ago, 2018, as I recall. Yeah. So he had taught, I noticed that he had taught college courses at all levels, from remedial math to PhD level. And he did not hesitate. He unhesitatingly gave talks to high schoolers. So I said, I'm going to do the same thing. So I've taught courses to college students at every level, from PhD to elementary statistics, and from the mathematical sciences, engineering, health sciences, all fields. I've given talks to elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, to students in elementary, middle, and high schools. And the hardest ones were the middle schoolers. To give a talk to middle schoolers is pretty tough. And I guess it has to do with the time of their life. The elementary kids will just sit quietly and accept whatever you say, but the middle schoolers are sort of rebellious. They're trying to decide what they want to do with their lives. Whereas the high schoolers, most of them who are interested in a math lecture have made up their minds that they're interested in math and science, so they'll listen carefully. I spent an enormous amount of time giving talks at schools. But you see, the payoff was that my research improved, because I had to think very carefully before going to high school as to what exactly I wanted to say. And it spilled over into my research. I honestly believe that I became a better writer and a clearer thinker because I forced myself to give talks to a wide range of audiences. Yes. So that's my advice to you, especially for those of you who hope one day to have children. By the way, is there anybody in the audience who has no intention whatsoever of having children? Am I allowed to even ask such a question? Probably not. But the fact of the matter is, most of you will end up having children, and you want to be the kind of teacher that you would like your children to have, right? A clear teacher, a better teacher, somebody who is willing to take the time to give talks at schools, and the benefits are there. So my advice to you is to think about doing that. Okay. Oh, before I go on, I also want to say something about, I haven't really said much about writing science yet, right? But I'm going to get to it. But I just want to say that, you are graduate students, so you're in your early 20s, right? Agreed? Is that right? No? Am I wrong on that? Hello?
Yeah, I guess most of us are in our
In your
20s.
mid-20s, right? And given the quality of medical care, given that you are on your way to higher education, to the highest levels of education, you know, there's a clear link between length of life and education. So there's a very high probability that some of you in the audience are going to live to age 100. And why are you shocked? If you don't like that, then I would be happy to take the years that you don't want. Just send them my way. I'll take every single one. Okay? But here's the thing. When you live to that ripe old age, you will have to be prepared to write and to deliver speeches on a vast range of topics. You will be working with graduate students. You will have to work with undergraduates, work with faculty. Some of you may go on to become department chairs. Some of you may become deans. You have to deliver convincing deliveries to a wide range of audiences. Some of you are going to get married and you're going to have to deliver a speech at your wedding, and it has to be clear. Some of you, you get my point, right? People are going to call on you. I well remember when I was at the Institute for Advanced Study, we had the tragic case of a postdoc. He was in his early 30s and he died, and it was a heart condition that they didn't know he had. And the people at the Institute, you know, we were all in shock. And then a bunch of them came to me and said, look, you have to deliver the obituary on behalf of all the people who live in the apartments where he lived. I almost fell over in shock. So I had to spend, you know, a day preparing an obituary under the most stressful of conditions. It was really tough. But later on, for about 2 months, people would come to me and say, you know, that was very nice what you said. And I said, I don't know where it came from, but I think it came from, you know, it all goes back to thinking about your audience, right? If you're going to an elementary school, what's the audience? Well, I have to deliver to that audience. Or if it's a middle school, there's my audience, right? So you're going to live you guys are going to, I bet you will live a very long time. And I really do hope you will live to a long, long time and work. And I hope you make lots of money so that you can pay Social Security taxes for people like Jim and me who are retired, right? So stay in good health, but you have to be a great writer and you have to be a clear thinker so that you can move up the chain and make huge salaries and send me my Social Security checks. Okay? It's not personal, it's just good writing. Okay, so now, the bottom line is, it's important to remain in contact with students at all levels and from a wide range of backgrounds. A classic example was, I found this in preparing my talk. There was a guy named Paul Farmer. Ever heard of him? Paul Farmer, make a note of that name. He died a few years ago. He was a brilliant doctor. You know, when I read that he had died, tears came to my eyes. And Paul Farmer was once asked by a reporter, but was once interviewed, and the reporter said he was explaining why he wanted to, even though he was an administrator, he still wanted to see patients. And the reporter said, does that mean that the other parts of your job would get stale if you lost the connection to patients? And Farmer said, the other parts of the job would get stale, but I think they would also become wrong. He was saying that if he stopped seeing patients and just became an administrator, he would then start making incorrect decisions. He says that when he saw patients, it unclouded his judgment. Administrators with no direct exposure to the suffering and the poor are much more liable to make errors in formulating policy. Without enough proximity, if you're not close enough to the sick or injured, then you start to think of people as abstractions, then as numbers, and then things get worse. And so that was one, I didn't think about this back when I was giving talks to schools, but I'm very glad I did. It kept me in touch. It forced me to have to think at the ground level, so to speak, to make life clear, to make things clear to the audience. Yes. So these are things to think about when you're writing an article or when you're preparing a document for anybody. right? Okay. So you now know what you need to do, right? So how do you begin to imagine you're on your own, you have no mentor? Well, there's lots of stuff out there. So the good news is there's lots of stuff. For example, there's a woman named Noor Qasim. She wrote a New York Times article, How Should a Person Write? Incidentally, I will be happy to send the slides. I'm going to post these slides on my website, but until I do that, I would be happy to mail it to everyone so that you can find the links. But she describes how should a person write, and she's, among other things, what she did was she spoke to a long list of authors. And one author said, Matthew, something I can't remember his name, Matthew O'Brien, I can't remember, but he said, the way I write is to revise and revise and revise. And he said, I will sometimes revise something for 2 months and then I will throw it aside and I will start again. I wait for a week, I start again, and I try to write a new version. And I sometimes find that the new version is worse than the first version, but then I know that I probably have produced the best possible version that I can write. Yes. Another article by Monteleone and Brew, What Makes Writing More Readable? Plain language, simplified sentences, everyday vocabulary, clear structure. Yeah, everyday vocabulary. Incidentally, here's a question for you. What is the meaning of the word ecosystem? Hello? Nobody? Does anybody know what it, does anybody know what it, I'm sorry?
I was going to ask if you want the responses in the chat, or you
Oh,
want
that'd be
people
great.
to
Sure, why not? Sure.
or people can unmute and speak.
Yeah, you can unmute and speak. That would be better. Yeah. Does anybody know the meaning of the word ecosystem? And I want to tell you the truth. I don't know what it means. I hear people in the crypto world using the word ecosystem. I hear all kinds of people using the word ecosystem, but nobody defines what exactly they mean by ecosystem.
I can try to do it off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine.
But I mean, when I hear ecosystem, I think it's like a community, like a wider community. I'm thinking it'd be like when you use it in nature, it's all the living things, animals, plants, organisms in a community and interacting with each other. Like an ecosystem maybe has that element of interaction.
Right. Yeah. The eco probably comes from ecological, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here is my theory as to what ecosystem means. And by the way, I think you're right. I mean, that's what they mean to convey. But when I hear, for example, the Bitcoin bros using the word ecosystem, it is my impression that what they're doing is they're trying to make the concept of the idea of buying Bitcoin sound happy and ecological and green and something that you just have to do because it's good for the planet. Which means then what they really want you to do is to send them your money. Yeah. So I finally came to the conclusion that the word, I instinctively in my home here, whenever the word ecosystem comes up, everybody looks at me because they know that I'm about to blow my top, right? And I'll get back to that in a moment. The point is that when people start using words which are not everyday or which did not used to be everyday vocabulary, and it's not clearly defined, you want to be careful. Okay, and I will say a little bit about that I will say more about that in a moment. So when you're writing, you want to use simplified sentences. You want to have, really clear vocabulary. And you have to remember that something like 20% of all the people in the US have learning disabilities. Yeah. And more than 7 million people have intellectual disabilities. So if you're writing and you want to reach 80% of the US society, you have to really think hard about how you're going to try to achieve that. And then there are millions of people in the country for whom English is not their first language. Now, you'll be writing in English. Some of your referees are going to be foreigners. English is not their first language. Yeah. A few years ago, I was visiting the Institute for Statistical Mathematics in Tokyo. And we were having lunch one day, and I was having lunch with a bunch of people, all of them Japanese, everybody in the room except me, I guess. Yes, I was the only non-Japanese person in the room. And there was a few students there. And one of the students said to me, he said, I have a question to ask you. He said, you're the first foreigner we've had here who we all understand what you're saying when you speak in English. But for other foreigners, we don't understand what they're saying. And I said, really? I said, well, and he said, how come? And I said, well, oh, I think I know why. I said, the reason why is because when I'm speaking to you, the way I would speak in English is not the way I would speak in English if I were back in the US. Yeah, because I'm aware that your English is not standard American English. So I choose my words more carefully, more simply. But I did it instinctively. You know, I didn't realize that I was doing it. Yeah. So I certainly would not use the word ecosystem when speaking to a Japanese researcher, for example. Yeah. So, right. So you're going to have to deal with students who have had limited access to education before getting into your class. I hope you will go give talks to middle school kids, especially if you plan to have children of your own. Always remember that your children could end up being taught by people who write just like you do, right? That's the old Confucian curse, right? May your children be taught by people who teach just like you do and write just like you do and think just like you do. So you want to be the best, right? And then there are, you know, older faculty, senior faculty who no longer have 20/20 vision, but they're going to referee your article or your research proposal, which is why you want to use 12-point font, folks. Please, please don't use anything smaller than 12-point. And of course, you have spell checkers. So there's no excuse nowadays for typographical errors, none whatsoever. As a department chair, you're going to have to educate the senior administrators about the benefits of having a department of statistics. Yes, I've had to do that. And Jim, I think you once had to do that, didn't you? Informing the department at Penn State?
Absolutely.
Yes, that was crucial, being able to explain to a non-statistician in clear, simple, down-to-earth language, what is the benefit of having a department of statistics, right? How many of you could write me a one-page letter to explain that? If I came to you and I said, you know, I'm thinking of carving up the Department of Statistics, ending it, laying off a bunch of people, and I will put part of statistics in math, part in economics, part in sociology, part in engineering, and part in computer science. Right, and you, so that's, by the way, this is homework for you. You don't have to hand it in, but try to do that. And it has to be clear. And you only get one chance. Yeah, it's not easy. It requires thought. Okay, so for those of you who were not born in the US or born in an English-speaking country, if you want to truly learn English, you have to read widely in English. Years ago, we had a student at Penn State, Wei Zhang. And I went to him one day and I said, Wei, I have a question to ask. How come your English is so much better than the English of the other Chinese students? I said, your English is flawless, but theirs is not. And he had not lived in the US before coming to graduate school. And he thought about it for a moment and he said, I don't know, but I will think about it. And then he came to me a few days later and he said, I think I know the reason why. He said that when I am speaking in English, I am completely in English. He said that the other students, what they tend to do is, if you talk to them in English, they first translate it into Chinese, then they formulate a response in Chinese, then they translate it back to English, and then they tell you. He said, I don't do that. I'm just English to English, or if I'm speaking in Chinese, it's Chinese to Chinese, Mandarin to Mandarin. And he said, that's the reason why my English is better. And I said, so how do I get the students, everybody to do that? And he said, I don't know how. He said, they're going to have to do it on their own. He said, but if they live in the US long enough, they'll be able to do it. So I think the way to do it is read very widely in English, not just science, by the way. Start off with, here's a great book by Hayakawa, S.I. Hayakawa, who was here it is. He was a linguist. He was a professor of linguistics at UC San Francisco. He was a psychologist. He was a semanticist, right? Hint, look it up. What is a semanticist? Somebody who studies semantics, right? But he was a teacher, a professor. He wrote books and papers. He was an administrator, and he even got elected he was a United States Senator for California. So, in order to become a senator, you need votes from not just from people who are in your political party, but you need some people from the other side. And he was very convincing. He also provided advice on semantics and linguistics for the United States Senate. He would correct their English whenever necessary. He wrote a book, Language in Thought and Action. I bought this book in 1980s or 1970s actually, and I still have my copy, which I do not lend even to my children. They can go buy their own. It has sold over 1 million copies and been translated into 8 languages. I urge you, I beg you to buy a copy of this book and read it over and over and over. Yeah, I reread it every 2 or 3 years, and you need to do that. Then you'll become a really good writer. You're on your way, at least. Okay. Hayakawa, Language in Thought and Action. Chapter 8, by the way, is about, the title of the chapter is, it has to do with Bessie the cow. And it's the funniest chapter I've ever, in that book. You should read it. But you realize when you read it that you're actually learning how to write better. So here we go. The classic book on writing, the classic American book on writing and grammar is by Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. This is the famous book. It appeared in the mid-1950s, as I recall. Yeah, mid-1950s. It's one of the 100 best and most influential books written in English since 1923. Again, they talk about elementary rules. By the way, Strunk and White were at Cornell. Elementary rules of usage, elementary principles of composition, of how you put together sentences. They warn you about commonly misused words and expressions, commonly misspelled words. It's a nice book. It's not my favorite, but it's worthwhile reading. My favorite is, one of my favorites is Strunk and White. Is Hayakawa, I'm sorry. Language in Thought and Action. Yes, right. And now here comes a really great one. William Zinsser on Writing Well. The Classic Guide to Writing Nonfiction. So Zinsser, who died a few years ago, said that it took him 50 years before he learned how to write well. Yeah, 50 years. But again, the advice is very simple. The basic advice. Write clearly. Very simply, guard the message with your life. In other words, you have a core message to give. Don't distract your readers by putting in other messages that drag their attention away from the core message, right? If you're writing a paper, you have, let's say you proved a really nice theorem on maximum likelihood estimation for specific kinds of data when your covariates might have, I don't know, some kind of distribution. What is the most important point in the paper? Guard it with your life. Place it in the center of the paper and then write around it. Yeah. Avoid jargon, technical language when you're talking to people on the street. Big words, ecosystem. Use active verbs. I did this, I did that. Don't be shy. When you're writing a paper, you don't boast, but don't be shy. You're trying to make the reader think that you not only enjoyed writing the piece, but that you were happy. You're happy to be working on that subject. Yes. His obituary appeared in the New York Times. Yes. And it's worth reading, by the way. He died in 2015. It's worth reading. But just remember, it took him 50 years before he learned how to write superbly. Yeah. So you're not 50. So you have, and you don't have to take that long, by the way. You can work harder, but that's fine. Keep going. Okay. Okay. Any questions? I'm not getting any questions. So maybe am I so clear in what I'm saying that no questions are really needed? Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. All right. If you say so or don't say so. All right. Yes, there's the famous mathematician Gustav Mittag-Leffler. Ever heard that name? Eminent mathematician. And he wrote a letter to Carl Sundman. Sundman is not well remembered these days, but he did some brilliant work on differential equations back in the 40s or 50s. And Mittag-Leffler wrote to Sundman, and he said, "Your paper is very appealing to me. To communicate with the mathematical public, one should not use a lot of terminology, the meaning of which is often not fully clear to the reader. One should, as you always do, say clearly what one means. One writes not only for those who are conversant with the question, those who are knowledgeable with the question, but one also wants to interest the wider mathematical public." Yes, that is absolutely the best advice, the highest quality of advice I can give to any writer. You're writing not just for yourself, but you're writing to educate everybody around you and everybody out there in the world. Yes. Okay. Right. Now I want to indulge in some shameless self-promotion. Armini, are you here?
I am.
Okay, thanks, Armini. So Armini Bagan, one of my colleagues at Penn State, she and I wrote a paper which is going to appear in the College Math Journal. And the title of the paper is "A Continuous Time Markov Chain Model for the Spread of COVID-19." All right, so let me bring up this paper. I'm going to bring up this paper on the screen here. Here we go. And all right, here we go. And by the way, before I go there, let me just say, I believe that this article satisfies Feynman's principle. Do you remember Feynman's principle? What was Feynman's principle? That if you can't explain it to an undergraduate, then you don't understand it. I believe that the article also satisfies Zinzer's principles. Remember Zinzer's principles, which is, make the reader think you enjoyed writing the piece. Use active verbs, avoid jargon and big words. Okay, here we go. By the time we're finished going through this paper, I believe you will say, yeah, you're going to tell friends you want to read this paper. You need to read this paper. If this paper is the best thing since whatever. Right, here we go. Right, can you see it?
No, it's just your slides.
Okay. So let me how do I share screen with that? Okay, so let me stop share, and then let me share with the different. So which one is it? Here we are. Okay, here we go. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So, a continuous time Markov chain model for the spread of COVID-19. Right. So let's read the abstract. Since late 2019. The novel coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, has caused a pandemic that persists. Blah, 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 blah. The paper shows how a continuous time Markov chain model for the spread of COVID-19 can be used to explain and justify to undergraduate students strategies now being used in attempts to control the virus. Okay, etc. The students, need to know a little bit about stochastic processes. But now look at the keywords and phrases. Cruise ship infections. Hypergeometric distribution, infectious diseases. So this is the important one, right? Cruise ship infections. Once you read cruise ship infections in the keyword and phrases, you are not going to pay much attention to hypergeometric distribution or Kolmogorov forward equation or stochastic modeling or Poisson processes. So when we wrote this paper, we're trying to get people to be unable to put this paper down. And cruise ship infections does it. So let's go on. I won't go through the paper in much detail. I'm just going to jump in, the introduction, by the way. Incidentally, the first paragraph, I believe your parents could understand. Since late 2019, the coronavirus has caused a pandemic. National and international organizations are searching for ways to control the virus, to protect educational institutions, health organizations, et cetera, et cetera. No question. Parents are going to sit up straight. Okay. Let's go on. I'm going to jump over the model and just go to, here's the math, of course, that from stochastic processes. But when you get now, the key is the examples, right? Applications to the spread of COVID-19. Now look at this. Consider a population whose residents intermingle rapidly during the pandemic. Examples: 2,000 fans attending a week-long basketball tournament, or 6,700 passengers who are on a 10-day jaunt on a fully packed cruise ship. And we go on and we show, by just using these simple formulas, right? The question is, how long will it take for all those fans? Here it is. Suppose we have 2,000 fans at this basketball tournament. P, 0.31, that's the secondary attack rate. In other words, the rate at which infections occur among contacts within the incubation period following exposure to a primary case. So in other words, somebody has COVID, a bunch of contacts are made with other people. What's the rate at which the new folks get infected while the primary person is still infectious? We use 0.31. Mu, that's the rate at which people make contact per hour. So we're saying they're making contact about once per hour. And then what we discover is that the average time until everybody is infected is about 24.5 hours. So the examples really grab you, even if you know nothing about stochastic processes, Kolmogorov forward differential equation, Kolmogorov forward equations, etc. Just reading another one is the cruise ship. I'm sure the cruise ship industry hated us, Armine, right? Because we chose these examples very carefully to illustrate what was going on. And I have to tell you, by the way, that in writing this paper, how many revisions of it did we do, Armine, to get to this stage? 10?
Well, multiple, definitely.
Yes. I think there were times when we would argue over whether the word a or the word the should be should we say, a contact or the contact, or an infection or the infection. So when you get to the point where you and your co-authors are yelling at each other about simple words like a versus the, your paper is closer to perfection. So we talked about 6,700 people on a cruise ship going on a 10-day dream vacation. We're using the secondary attack rate, 0.31, which, by the way, is highly conservative for seagoing vessels. We found examples of seagoing vessels where the secondary attack rate was 90%, 0.9. We also assumed that people would make contact with each other on average about 3 times per day, because they're going for meals or breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Incidentally, to make contact means they get within 6 feet of each other. That's what it means to make contact. And we calculate that the expected time until the entire ship, every single person is infected, is about 9.5 days. So are you surprised when you read that thousands of cruise ships were completely overrun with COVID infections? No, no. Right. But the point to the writing is that you choose examples that force the reader to be unable to put down the paper and do something else. Yeah. So I know this is self-promotion. I hope the referee for my paper, well, the paper has now been accepted. So even if the referee is here, well, it's too late for them to take it back. But I would like to think that this is an example of a well-written paper. Now, can it be improved? Probably. But my bet is that if people read the paper, they will say, oh no, I don't want to spend time revising this. This paper is written quite clearly and satisfying those principles. So in any case, that's how you try to write. You try to write with examples and with words that just grab people and do not let them go. Do not let them go. Okay. All right. So back to my let me go back now to my slides. Here we go. All right. So yes, when you write a paper, you want people to think that they have to read the paper. They need to read it. They cannot put it down. And so you have to work. It's hard work to be a great writer. It's hard. I have not yet achieved greatness. I will forever try. But even to get to the point where I am is pretty tough. But it's also a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. Michael Thaddeus. Have you heard of him? Michael Thaddeus is a professor of mathematics at Columbia University. And he has been causing the Columbia University administrators, he has been causing them a lot of headaches. And rightly so. They absolutely deserve all the headaches they are getting from him. And you should, if you look him up on the New York Times website or on Wikipedia, you will find out why. So he is a mathematician, very pure mathematician. Works on algebra and number theory. And a reporter interviewing him said to Thaddeus that you've been described as a proponent of generalist education. How has that influenced your professional life? And Thaddeus said, I think that there's a tendency nowadays to deprecate, to put down the humanities and assume that science and technology are going to be more practical and useful subjects for students. I reject that distinction. I think that a sound education in the humanities is very important for would-be scientists, and that scientists need to learn how to express themselves clearly. They need to learn how to write a vigorous sentence, a clearly organized paragraph, to think about the motives of the people they're working with and the social function of the work that they do. Yeah, it's really true. You will find as you continue in your career that there are consequences for the society of the work that you do. And if you aim to do important work, which you should, you will find that there are many spin-offs of your work that you would never have imagined. So you want to write well to prevent people from being misled or from misunderstanding what you did. Okay, so the bad news now. There's a huge amount of bad writing across the world, and even in statistics. In research statistics, as I said, for statistics and probability letters, 20% of only about 20% of the papers sent to me have been accepted. And by the way, I want to make it clear that, I didn't just reject the papers outright. I send them to referees too, and the referees come back with complaints. And then I have no choice but to recommend to the editors that the paper be declined. So if you work diligently, really put your heart into improving your writing, I am confident that you can bet 75% of the competition. So that's good news, right? If you can beat 75% of your competitors, then you're ahead. But the bad news is the following. The competition to publish in a high quality journal is very strong, right? The Annals of Statistics or Biometrica, I am sure, are accepting they reject more than 75% of the papers submitted. And my joke is, I've always said to students, imagine that you train for 20 years to run the 100 meters and you qualify for the Olympic Games final. and you badly want to win the gold medal. And then you look to your left, and who do you see standing there? You see Usain Bolt. What would you do? Your heart would drop, right? Yeah, right? So in running, Usain Bolt was born to run that way. But in writing, you can be Usain Bolt, but you have to practice. Yeah. So you try to be the Usain Bolt, and when you come to the table with your paper, people just say, oh, don't even try to compete with her or with him. Just accept the paper. End of story. Yeah. So be your toughest critic. Before you submit a paper, ask, is that paper superbly written? Is the language flawless? Is the structure strong? Is it important? Is the research problem important? I see papers come in where the research problem is not important. You know, who cares how many dots are on the back of a turtle that is moving up, that is crossing the street? Or who cares how many steps it takes? Here in Massachusetts, there are lots of turkeys running around. I mean, real turkeys, not human turkeys, but you know, bird turkeys, and they're constantly crossing the street. Now, if a paper is submitted to a journal which estimates the number of steps that the turkey takes to cross the road, who cares? So you want to always, I think it is important to have, when you're starting your research career, to make a list of the top 10 most important problems in your field and nearby fields. And then attack one of them. Attack the important problems. If you don't attack the important problems, then why are you doing this for a living? Go do something else that's important. Now, you may not be able to solve that particular important problem, but you might be able to make a small inroad, and that's better than not having tried. So attack important problems, right? Investigate the problems completely, which means you have to think about it from every possible direction. And by doing that, you will find that your writing has to improve as you think about the problem from different directions. So good writing and good thinking go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. It's both together or both not at all. Right. That's just my take on research over the years. Okay. So, right. So here's one of my biggest complaints about scientific writing. Right. So as I said, I've processed hundreds of papers over the years and refereed many others for which I wasn't the associate editor. And the word where, right? Suppose someone says, suppose that a function f maps x to y, and they go on and on and on and on and on, and then 2 pages later they say where x is and y is. Well, what that forces me to do then is to go back and read everything now that I understood what x means. So whenever I receive a paper, the first thing I do is to search the PDF file for the word where. And if I see one instance where, no pun intended, where something is defined, where a notation or a concept is defined after it is used. So they say blah, 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 and they talk about blah, but then they say where, I get upset. You always want to define things before you use them. Because if you don't, then you're forcing the reader to reread the sentence several times in order to understand the meaning of each concept. When you become an editor, you're not required to read a paper completely. The referees are expected to read the paper completely. But associate editors at least are going to look for signs that a paper is well written or not. And if I find 5 typographical errors in a paper, I reject it. Yeah, I reject it, 5. No, I will write back and say the paper has too many typographical errors, so please revise and resubmit it. But then that costs the author, 2 months or something like that. But worst case scenario is that in the worst case scenarios, when a paper has 5 typographical errors, it is typically a sign that the author did not read the paper, read what they wrote very carefully. And then, well, it's goodbye. So the word weird is a real killer. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any questions? How are we doing so far on time? I did not, okay, good. Yes. All right. Yes.
I actually have a question.
Yes. Yes.
So in terms of avoiding like the use of the word where, where you say suppose this, you're trying to put like the definitions in front of the equation. So
That's
is
right.
it I guess like an example for that, would it be say like define X and Y as linear equations? You say that and then you put the formula after that?
Yes. 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 The flow of your exposition should be linear. I shouldn't have to double back over and over again in order to find out what's going on. I shouldn't have to read any sentence twice. So you define the notation before you use it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and when I write paper, when I'm writing paper, Armini and I have written, we wrote a paper on something to do with positive definite matrices. Hoffman probability inequalities for positive definite matrices. And I'm sure that when we were putting together our rough notes, there were lots of use of the word weird. But when the time came to write the paper, oh, we double, triple checked to make sure that we didn't commit that kind of mistake. And I'm actually happy to say that that first paper we wrote, it was accepted in a pretty good journal, the Journal of Theoretical Probability, with minimal comments from the referees. The referees essentially said, oh, this is very nice. We did have a little question about this or that, but the paper should be accepted. And so we made the very quick changes, very minor changes. It took us less than 1 day, and then we sent it back. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Being rejected, by the way, can be a good thing as long as you learn from it. So always send your papers to the best possible journals where you think they can be accepted. And if it gets rejected, then you look at the you will at least have gotten good comments, and then you improve on the comments and you improve on your writing, and then you go somewhere else. So being rejected is no shame. Believe me, I've been rejected many times. Okay. So the conclusion is that well, I'm not, just to conclude this part of the talk, you want to read extensively, the Botners and the Feynmans and Gross and Strickards and so on. And by the way, given that I am the one giving this talk, please don't hesitate to look for a paper of mine and trash it and then send me comments saying, oh, you could have improved this and you could have improved that, right? I deserve to be held to the same standards that I am recommending, right? But you want to practice writing it so clearly that reviewers of your grant proposals just say, this is a beautiful grant proposal, please fund it. Yeah, you have to revise and revise and revise and revise over and over and over again. Okay. Right? You can almost never be done revising. Yeah, see the article by Norca Sim. And by the way, Charlotte Bronte or Emily Bronte, I can't remember which one of them, but one of them was famous for taking 3 years to revise her books. After the book was done, she would spend years revising and revising and revising it. Now, I grant you, if you're an assistant professor and you're going to be up for tenure in 5 years, you can't do that. But you can spend 3 months revising an article. You can, and if necessary, you should. Yeah. Because the fact is that writing clearly and thinking clearly are closely related. They either both go together or they don't. If you can't write clearly, then you probably aren't thinking clearly. And if you aren't thinking clearly, then you're not going to be able to write clearly. Good. Now, this being a short course, I should also have an assignment for you, right? Everybody agrees with that? Any objections? No objections. Okay, good. So here is my assignment. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. And here is the assignment. Ready? It's only going to take you 10 minutes. Oh, wait, I want to send this to everybody, right? Send chat to everyone. Here are some words. Okay. I've sent you 5 words. The words round, circle, wheel, moon, sun. Right? They all connote round. Right? Okay. I want each of you to spend 5 minutes. Maybe we should stop. Do we want to stop for 5? But I want each of you to spend 10 minutes writing a poem on the concept of circle or wheel or round or moon or sun or what have you. It could be a poem. It could be a love letter to your spouse, right? You're trying to convince the spouse that you're the best thing since motherhood and apple pie. Please write me a poem. It could be a song. Go ahead. All right. So let's start. We're going to restart. I'm going to wait until 4:30, and then I'm going to see what you produced. Jim, that includes you. Arminia, you too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Answers returned in the chat, or where do you want them?
Well, I'm going to pick people at random. I'm going to roll a coin, and then I'm going to pick people at random. Yeah. But the older you are, the higher the probability that you will be chosen. Right. So the exercise is designed to get you to think hard about how to relate these various things, right? And to come up with and you have to come up with something it can't be just, gibberish. It has to be connected in some way. Anybody wants to go ahead? Oh, hold on a second. I'll be back in 1 second. In 1 minute. Okay, any luck? Anybody? Anybody wants to go ahead?
Why not?
All right, Dalton. I'll pick on Dalton.
Oh gosh, I have to go first.
Sure, why not? Well, hey, you want to be last in life or first in life?
Okay. I tried to write a poem, but I'm not a poet. So, okay. So I said, when I write my dissertation, my thoughts go round and round, trying so hard to break new ground. I hope when I defend that my hard work is clear, but until then, I will continue onward, trying not to fear.
Good, good, good. All right. Okay, who's next? Come on, I want people to volunteer. I don't want to have to pick on people. Priyanjali. No response? Okay, Hannah?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Playing with the form.
Yeah.
It's like a math drawing, I guess. Yeah.
So can you read it for us?
Yeah, I say let sun, then I do the caret to the moon, where the caret is in orbit. I was trying to use the word where to be silly.
So you defined your but you define your notation after you used it.
Yes.
Hold on a second. Let me okay, sorry. I'm not happy with that, but that's okay. Oh wait, oh no, that's bad. That the light is that worse? Can you see me better with the light? With
I can see you okay.
okay, good. All right, that's right. All right, it's okay. So actually, well, okay, let's take one last try. Rebecca?
Okay, so I tried making a poem. I was thinking about other poems and songs that have these words.
Okay.
So I got in the circle of life, the seasons go round,
Mhm.
the sun and the moon go up and down, and we wheel ourselves around. And I could not figure out how to end it, but that's where I am.
Okay, so so the reason why, so you may wonder, why did I pull this stunt on you, right? Oh, so suddenly yeah, why did I suddenly say, hey, can you please write me a poem using those phrases? Well, ever heard of Alan and Marilyn Bergman?
Nope.
Well, Alan and Marilyn Bergman are two of the greatest songwriters the US has ever had. You know, they've won every award. It is just incredible. And in fact, so the lyrics to one of their songs, one of their songs is let me try and find it, is, I believe it's let me try and find that. If you look at their Wikipedia page and look at their list of notable works, it's just incredible the number of songs for which they've written the lyrics. They took this song from, there is a French writer named Michel Legrand who composed a song, and then they wrote an English version of it. And you can find it on Wikipedia, not Wikipedia, on YouTube. I'm trying to find it. And there, yes, so the title of the song is Windmills of Your Mind. Yeah, the Windmills of Your Mind. And in that, so your homework is to go to Wikipedia, look for the song Windmills of Your Mind, and just read the lyrics by Alan and Marilyn Bergman. It is incredible. I don't know how they did it. I mean, they must have taken them years arguing over every little word. But that's an example of superb writing. It's not scientific writing, but it's writing. Every word is their favorite friend to fit into the right slot. Another person is Stephen Sondheim. You ever have anybody here not heard of Stephen Sondheim? Wow. These guys, I'm glad they weren't mathematicians. Yes, yes. If they had been if those guys had been statisticians, we would be toast, because they would have outwritten us so beautifully that we would never be able to compete with them. But we can learn from them. So read the lyrics of the famous songwriters, or the famous playwrights, or the famous mathematicians, and you will be 95% ahead of the competition. That's my advice to you. Yes. So I'm hoping that this is being an education for you. Please, if not, I'm happy to refund your how much do you have to pay to attend this conference? $20 each, right? I'll send you $20 if you tell me that it wasn't worth your while. Okay. All right. So to wrap up then, yes. So to wrap up, I want to go back to the issue of ecosystem. There's a little book named Unbullshit by Harry Frankfurt. Harry Frankfurt is Emeritus Professor of Philosophy at Princeton University. And he wrote this little book. it's a very little book. It's literally, you know, this size, and maybe it's even smaller than this actually, and it's about 30 or 40 pages. And he gave a talk somewhere and wrote a paper, and the paper was so popular that Princeton University Press said, would you like to issue this as a book? And so he said, why not? And that's the book, On Bullshit. In my view, it's the best little book ever written on the art of identifying nonsense or bullshit, including unclear thinking, imprecise thinking. I've owned 2 copies actually for years, and I don't lend them out. No. One is my copy for traveling, and one is for my home library. And from reading that book, I saw many years ago that about nearly 100% of everything being written about cryptocurrencies, NFTs, blah, 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 was so I stayed away. I also did some other things. I once downloaded the Bitcoin trading prices from some website. I don't know, right? Some website, and I did a statistical test of randomness, and I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin prices were being manipulated. The trading wasn't truly random. Yeah. No, you know, that doesn't prove that it wasn't random, but you know, I don't want to lose money. You know, I'm not a fireman, right? I'm a smoke detector. So if I detect smoke, I start running for the doors. So I stayed away from all those crypto ecosystem things and those unhackable blockchain protocols and so on and so forth. And I got to thinking about it. And that's when I said, you know, I came to the conclusion that I was never able to find a clear, precise definition of the crypto ecosystem. But it all goes back to the unclear thinking. And by the way, you know, people have lost a lot of money on Bitcoin. You know, remember that thing went as high as $65,000 per coin, and now it's at, I don't know, 20,000 per coin. All the people who paid 60,000 are never getting their money back. So the moral of the story, writing clearly and thinking clearly are important for your financial ecosystem, whatever that system might be, for your financial good health. I'm just joking here, right? So please download this book by Harry Frankfurt and read it. Your writing will improve. Yeah. So that brings me to the almost the end of my talk. I'm sorry, I apologize for having you know, sort of suckered you into trying to write a poem when what I really wanted, I was hoping you would have used ChatGPT to write your poem, but I guess you're not yet doing that, right? Okay, that's fine. So here is a list of the most, maybe not all of the people's names who I mentioned. I mentioned Gross, Ken Gross, Karem. I didn't mention the other, I listed 2 other chefs, but that's okay. David Friedman, Pisani Purvis, Botner, Strickards, Feynman, Paul Farmer, Nur Qasim, Hayakawa, Strunk and White, William Zinzer. If you only read David Friedman's books and papers, and Hayakawa and Zinzer, and of course you have to read Bagan and Richards. You need to read that paper. I'm joking. And Harry Frankfurt, you'll be fine. Yeah. And revise. And look, every once in a while, maybe you can find a retired professor of statistics and you write to him and you say, hey, you know, I'm about to send out this paper. Do you want to take a look and tell me what you think? And maybe the professor won't be so busy and he'll write back and say, yeah, well, you know, I'm happy with this, but I'm not happy with that. So look around for some retired people who are totally bored or not too bored, and maybe they'll respond. Okay. And finally, my final slide is this. So you've heard of, I assume you've heard of Hokusai, who was the great Japanese artist. It took him several years, you know, to draw this, to to draw this famous painting, The Great Wave of Kanagawa. And when you look at this painting, you have this gigantic wave, but then here's a boat, and here are some people in the boat. Here's one boat, here's a second boat over here, here's a third boat over here. And all of these people, the fishermen, their heads are down. They are not paying any attention to the wave. They're concentrating on trying to catch fish to get food. In a sense, my feeling is that we're all like these fishermen. We're not too worried about everything that's going on in life. We're trying to do the right things to improve our writing. And that's what you have to be. Just concentrate on being a great writer and trying to be a great writer, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Okay? All right. So I think that brings me to the end of my talk. Armini, thank you for not yelling at me. Let me end my stop sharing. Right. Thank you for wait, I cannot see my my Zoom. Oh, here we are. Okay, great. It had disappeared. Right. Armini, yes, thank you for not yelling at me over V and A in the paper this time. Right. And I hope that what I said will help. I'm happy to send the talk to. In fact, if you want to, I can send it right now. Would you like me to do that?
Sure. Thank
Okay.
you.
How do I do it? No, you have to tell me how to. Okay, I go to chat, right? And then I click on file, right? Okay, let's wait.
If you have it saved with a link,
I don't have
the
it.
URL.
I don't have a link. No, I don't have a link yet.
Why
but
don't
I
you
can
send it? Yeah. Then you can send it to Megan, copy me, and we'll make sure
All right, I'll do
everyone
that.
here has access to it.
All right, I can do that instantly. Okay.
All right.
All right. So I'll send that to Megan instantly, and I'll send it to you too, Jim. Right? Here we go.
Sounds good. Yes.
All right. All right. So any
Mr.
questions?
No questions, anyone? Thank you, Don. This
All
has
right.
been, as usual, stimulating, thought-provoking.
Thank you.
Thank
And,
you. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay. All the best.
And for everyone else, we'll turn this on again tomorrow at noon. But
All
thank you,
right.
Don. And
All right.
we'll share that set of slides and all that information. I found On Bullshit in our local library, so I've already ordered a copy.
That's right.
See what
Yeah.
I can learn. See how much
Yes.
of what you've just told us is described in that book.
Okay, good. And I've now sent the file to you and Megan. I sent it to you at your Penn State address.
That's fine. Yep.
All right,
We'll
good.
get it.
All right. And if you don't get it, you just send me an email and I'll send it to you directly. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
Take care. Take good care.
Thank
Stay
you.
well, everyone.
All right.
We'll be in
Bye-bye.
touch tomorrow.
Right. Bye.